Introduce some more chiefs and elders to you, but we're zooming now straight into our debate session. It's important to clarify that the debate is a group debate. We have 2 against 3. If you have ever read Walter Rodney or John Fage's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, you would get a true sense of what it is. And the big question we're asking tonight is, should Africa be compensated by the colonial masters? Should they or should they be not? And all our 5 contestants will come up and justify why Africa should be compensated or should not be compensated. First, they will come in their individual capacities, and then they will have a group rebuttal. All 5 of them will present, and then when they are done, the judges will make a determination on how well they performed or otherwise on this grand stage. But also, let me make quick mention of the people, chiefs and people of Jakiti, Akomu Jakiti, who have joined us here. They've been our solid partners for our Easter celebrations. And Nana Kofi Ewa from Asehene is leading the pack. Let's hear it for Nana Kofi Ewa and his team. And as we move on, we'll introduce some more chiefs to you. But first, let's start off from the Upper East region. And Aisha is speaking for the motion whether Africa should be compensated for the slave trade or not. Now, she is speaking for that motion. Tonight she's been clothed by Temashe in Jolu. Let's hear it for Aisha!
Honorable judges, chiefs and queen mothers present, fellow contestants, all protocols duly observed, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you all. Have you ever thought of how it will feel like to be a slave? To be wrapped in chains, beaten and thrown into the dungeons? Ladies and gentlemen, tell me how you would feel if you are a slave. Whatever happened to Africans was a very big shame and injustice, and for which I, Aisha, stand here today to speak for the motion that Africans should be compensated for the slave trade. Firstly, human rights of Africans were abused. They were made to go through trauma. The human rights of Africans were abused so much. Their rights like education, freedom of speech, and the freedom of movement were abused. Ladies and gentlemen, how would you feel if you can't even step out of your own home? You can't step out of your comfort zone. Our forefathers went through a lot of suffering. And for this matter, I think that Africans should be compensated. Slavery has also contributed to the poor economic growth. And since African has been suffering, they have been suffering a lot with high burden of loans. We go around taking so many loans from people. Ladies and gentlemen, our economy keeps on reducing just because people came to capture our own people out of Ghana, out of Africa, which is so unfair to humanity. African beautiful maidens were raped and defiled, as if that wasn't enough. They made sure that they threw the babies of these innocent mothers into the sea for the wild fishes to devour. This is so unfair. Don't they have a sense of regret? Don't they have a sense of regret? Ladies and gentlemen, there needs to be an element of regret, and a compensation will serve as a measure for such regrets. Ladies and gentlemen, a compensation is therefore needed to prepare Africans to be able to grow, expand, and develop. A compensation is also needed to help us to be able to stand on our own and be self-reliant, to be able to stand as just one Africa and work as a team. We need to be compensated. Ladies and gentlemen, we demand an apology from the whites. We demand debt cancellation. All the debts that we owe should be cancelled. Ladies and gentlemen, we demand developmental assistance. Let's be real here. Our Africans made sure that they work so hard for the so-called developed countries to become who they are today. Yes, we made them possible. We made them who they are today. So we have to be compensated. If Africa is suffering and people are dying, and then we are here, the world is here and thinking that there is nothing wrong with it, then it's a shame. It is injustice. And tonight, I shall stand here and ask and plead everyone here to help me fight for justice for Africans, because we need it. We need it. Our forefathers' souls are asking for justice. Let us together as one speak, stand up, and fight for justice. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, next to speak for the motion is from the Volta region, Anna.
Panel of judges, distinguished guests, Togbio, Mamao, Nananum, Nimek and Name, duly observed, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from the Volta region. The American statesman Abraham Lincoln once said, "Whenever I hear anyone argue for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to have it tried on them." These statements resonate with me, and I want to say unequivocally that I am and will never be in support of slavery. So now, let's move on to the substantive issue. Should Africans be compensated for slave trade? No, it's a big no for me. To begin with, slave trade is the capturing, buying, and selling of human beings. The indigenous black Africans were actively involved in slave trade, especially the chiefs. When the white slaves came to the coast, waiting for slaves to be brought from
and sometimes, just sometimes, technology has a way of stepping in the middle of things.
some of our middlemen, especially, capture their own people and sell them to slavery. Since we are trying and fighting for compensation, I would like to ask, are they also to pay for compensation? Second, look at the emotional trauma we put some of these Africans into. Their families were kidnapped. Relatives were tortured. Can we compensate them emotionally? Compensations cannot be quantifiable, but even if you quantify the amount, my question is, who do you pay to? Is it the African countries or the black people in the diaspora? Lastly, according to the Organization of Economic and Cooperation Development, if you calculate in the last 50 years, about $3.3 trillion was given as foreign aid to Africans. It's almost $6.6 trillion. Now, let me take you to the books, the holy books. According to the New International Version of the Holy Bible, in Ezekiel 18, verse 20, the soul who sins is the one who will die. The son will not share the guilt of the father, neither will the father share the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous will be accredited to them, and the wickedness of the wicked will be charged against them. Slave trade started from the 16th century to the 18th century. Why then do we want present people to pay for the mistakes of past people? Is it fair? It's like me working 13 weeks to be crowned the Queen of GMV 2019, and then you tell me that I should wait for my child to come and take the crown. Is it fair? Definitely not. Panel of judges, distinguished guests, Togbio, Mamao, Nananom, Nimekename, all protocols duly observed. Ladies and gentlemen, a former slave, Frederick Douglass, who escaped to become an abolitionist, said, a knowledgeable man is unfit to be a slave. Instead of we crying and fighting for compensation, why don't we focus on acquiring more knowledge so that the abominable slave trade and something similar will never happen on our land again? Long live Africa, long live Ghana. My name is Mamaga, and forever I remain black and proud. Thank you.
A round of applause for Enam, representing the Volta region. Now we're taking it to the Ashanti region. And Sawa is for the motion that Africa should be compensated for the slave trade. Her costume tonight is by Dash Fashion GH in Tabora. A round of applause for Sawa.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are paramount among them all. A paraphrase from Thomas Jefferson, a founding member of the United States of America in the Declaration of Independence. Good evening, judges, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. I strongly believe and support the motion that Africans should be compensated for the slave trade. To compensate in the Cambridge Learner's Dictionary means to get something to make you feel better after you have suffered something. Africans have suffered many forms of abuse and emotional torture for ages through the slave trade. From the 15th to 19th centuries, more than 11 million black captives were forcibly transported to the Americas, with unknown multitudes disappearing on seas. Oh God, give me a relaxed state of mind to describe the dreadful and insensitive acts where our bravest hearts and innocent women were crawling on their stomachs as they watched their bodies being branded, flayed, and mutilated. How can one put a blind eye on these inhuman activities and say Africans do not deserve any compensations? Ladies and gentlemen, the slave trade is the source of racism and related discriminations that the African in the diaspora is suffering today. If the African color is disrespected today, it has its roots from the way our forefathers were treated as nothing lesser beings. And it's a pity that in the 21st century there is still racial brutality. The slave trade left Africa underdeveloped as the best of our labor force were shipped to develop the West, holding back our own progress. The scientific and industrial revolutions were possible because of the blood, toil, and intelligence exploited from our forefathers. Yet, their efforts were not acknowledged or appreciated. Honorable judges, there is an act in the US called the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which was signed and passed under the leadership of President Ronald Reagan. This act granted that there is reparation for Japanese Americans, for internment, native land seizures, race prejudice, etc. Africans suffered even a worse condition, but yet no reparations. Malcolm X once said, and I quote, "If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. If you pull it out all the way out, that's not progress. The progress comes from healing the wound the blow made." End of quote. No mistake. The knife is still planted in our backs. And it is time we not only removed it, but healed the wound. We are still bearing psychological wounds and emotional scars of the suffering of our ancestors. And nothing short of a massive financial compensation, educational support, writing off the debts Africans or Americans and European countries, and heartfelt apologies from the countries that committed these crimes to the descendants of slave trade can heal the deep wound afflicted. To my brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, grandparents from the diaspora, I uphold your confidence. I uphold your confidence and spirit of togetherness for coming back home as we commemorate this year of return. It is another opportunity for us to educate each other about our heritage and to accurately portray African history and acknowledge Africans' contribution to world history and civilization. Akwaba, may the souls of our forefathers forever rest in peace. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for the Ashanti Regional finalist, Sewa. The round of applause, let's welcome Ekua.
Distinguished guests, all protocol duly observed. My co-debaters, ladies and gentlemen, I, Ekua Mens Banaman, is highly honored to be given the opportunity to speak against the motion, and I quote, "Should Africans be compensated for slave trade?" Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, slave trade is defined as the capturing, selling and buying of a person who is acquired as a personal property of the slave master. My honorable judges, I would like to address my points according to these important questions. Questions that I believe that will put all of us to rest if, and I repeat, if and only if my opponents would answer to all of us as Africans. My honorable judges, my first question is, who enslaved who? Ladies and gentlemen, let me emphasize on the fact that my argument could have taken a different direction if the topic for the debate was, should Africans be compensated for slavery? This is because we all know that slavery is legally against the fundamental human rights. Even under the Constitution of Ghana, Chapter 5 of Fundamental Human Rights and Freedom, Clause 14 for the first point, which states, every person is eligible of his personal liberty, and no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty unless in some special cases. So this I say, yes, if it was compensation for slavery, then we all could have asked for reparations. But since there was a trade, then and not laudable enough to ask for compensations. Because trade, I believe, cannot suffice if the other party does not support. So, ladies and gentlemen, our own African leaders of that time supported the act. And they sold us in exchange for curries, smoking pipes, dresses, and many others. It baffles me. Like, it's really sad. I can't even think far that our own African leaders will do this to us. And we are here and my opponent is asking for compensation. I believe she doesn't even understand the topic. Ladies and gentlemen, let us also talk about the perpetrators and victims of the slave trade. I say this because Africans, Europe, and Americans share a collective memory of enslavement and colonization. But let's consider this. It is a history of perpetrators on one side and victims on the other side, even though there are examples of African complicity in some acts of slavery and genocide. But come to think of it, if the descendants of the victims of slave trade are being compensated, then what happens to the perpetrators who sold us to the Americans or the white people? Are we asking them to compensate us? Since they are no more, then I believe that their descendants have to compensate us because it was our African leaders who sold us out. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that reparations begins at home, just as charity begins at home. My honorable judges, the idea of compensation falls short since it is impossible to compensate for enslavement and colonization. Nothing, and I mean nothing, can make up for the millions of lives that were lost or even bring back the dead. Ladies and gentlemen, I say to you all that no amount of compensation can keep or bring our descendants, the victims back. There is no way. So we should not accept compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing we have to understand is that it is in the past and is best left there. But moving on, Africans and the entire world have to learn from the past and not to repeat it again. Compensation is never important. If there is the need for us to be compensated, then I, Ekua, believe that our own African elected leaders have to compensate us, and we have to compensate each other. Compensation has to start from honest government. We need to be compensated for anti-corrupt system. We need to be compensated for truth and transparency in leadership. And I believe this will put our continent at a higher level. Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that you will put African at the top, then I want us all to be on our feet as we recite the pledge. Kindly be on our feet as we recite the pledge. If you promise to uphold Africa, if you promise to work hard for Africa, we are reciting together. I promise on my honor to be faithful and loyal to Ghana, my motherland. I pledge myself to the service of Ghana with all my strength and with all my heart. I promise to hold in high esteem our heritage won for us through the blood and toil of our forefathers. And I pledge myself to all things to uphold and defend the good name of Ghana. So help me God. Thank you.
Ekua from the Central Region. And Sa is speaking against the motion. Closed by Liran Collections located in Tema. Make some noise for Sa!
Fellow debaters, Membeimo, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Sa and I represent the Western North region. And tonight, I firmly speak against the motion and I quote, Africans should be compensated for the slave trade, unquote. One may ask, what is slave trade and compensation? Slave trade is the procuring, transporting, selling of human beings as slaves. In particular, the slave trade that happened with black Africans being sold to North America and the Europeans. And with compensation, it is money that is paid to someone in exchange for something lost or damaged. To begin with, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I want to draw your attention to the cliche of life, which says, with every coin, there are two sides. A lot has been said about slave trade, and each time it is said to condemn slave trade. This is what Shima Amanda Ngozi, the Nigerian writer, will say, the danger of a single story. In this single story, we say things that is only cited to favor slave trade and people who suffered it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to draw your attention and ask that why are we pretending to not see the brighter side of slave trade? Have you all forgotten that because of slave trade, some African countries became strong, rich, stable, and still standing? Let me take you back to the modern day Mali. In the 16th century, the Bambara or the Bamana Empire had most of its wealth through slave trade. Again, slave trade couldn't have been possible without our African people. Ladies and gentlemen, who will pay for this? Who will pay for the compensation when this thing occurred between two people? Some of our forefathers gave their own brothers and sisters out for schnapp, salt, sugar, and all things, and in exchange gave their brothers to slave masters. Honorable judges, in my language, there is a proverb, and I quote, "Inshirema yo chuchujemba bao." And in Chi, they will say, "Inshirema ne chuchenyomba." In English, it simply means it is whistling that attracts songs. And this is exactly what some of our forefathers did. They sent their people and in exchange took items. So why being compensated for it? Why do one have to compensate the other after agreeing on a mutually beneficial venture? Why? Last but not least, slave trade has increased travelers into our country. There is this popular musician with a popular song, Bambi, and his name is Jidena. He said in one of his interviews that he traveled to Ghana with over 25,000 people, and each average traveler spent $3,000. And in our local economy, it is 75 million points, and it is 1.58 GDP in Ghana. Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Nana Nom, my opponents, I have one question for you. I want to remind you that the only time somebody has to be compensated is when he or she doesn't know and you took advantage of the person, which is not the situation here, begging for compensation. Instead of us asking for compensation, we should rather be motivated to study hard, learn, and be each other's keeper to move our nation and our continent forward, not to ask for compensation. Compensation will not be enough for Africa. All we have to do is to stand up for ourselves, work, and be hardworking too, and learn, so that at the end, we can all say that we are black and proud. Thank you.
And I told you earlier about rebuttal. It's important to state that this debate tonight is in sync with the year of return, presently in celebration, a full year of celebration, to signify, or if you like, to commemorate the 400 years since the first set of slaves were moved from Jamestown here in Accra to Jamestown in Virginia. You've heard the ladies espouse their individual views. Now, they will come to you in groups, for and against. We have 3 persons speaking against the motion and 2 speaking for the motion. They have a total of 10 minutes to make their point, 4 minutes for each group, 1 minute for each one of them to make a conclusion. It's important also to mention that tonight, the voting standards are 60% for the judges and 40% for you, the voting public. So vote *713 *2 hash. Also go on to Google Play Store and Apple Store and download. Let's go now to the speakers for the motion. We see Aisha and Sewa. So your time starts now, ladies.
Ladies and gentlemen, Permit me to ask Miss Sa a question. Miss Sa from the Western North, when you were speaking, you made mention about Mali. You just came here and you mentioned Mali without telling us anything about Mali. Just stating that Mali is very developed because of slave trade. Underline the word very developed. How sure are you? I need proofs.
Miss Aisha, I believe that when I was talking, you weren't paying attention. Because if you were really paying attention, I didn't mention Mali to talk about Mali. I said Bamana Empire, which is now part of Mali. I was talking about the 16th century and how the Bamana Empire developed, and it's being part of Mali now. I hope your question has been answered.
Okay, thank you. Enam. Miss Enam from the Volta region. You said that in your point 3, you made mention of something and you said that we shouldn't be compensated in your point 3 because it is not fair. What do you mean by it is not fair for us to be compensated?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. I'd like you to answer the question yourself. Okay, so imagine you work at the end of the month. You're supposed to take 500 cedis at the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, they give you 200 cedis, that there's no money in the coffers of the office. So later on, they'll add the 300 cedis to it for you. Will you be okay with that?
Obviously.
Is it fair?
So you are trying to tell me that it is fair?
No, what I'm saying is that it's not fair. With the example I stated, that imagine you working 13 weeks to be crowned as a GMB queen. And then on that day, they tell you that you are denied of the crown. And then they tell you your daughter should come for the crown. Is it fair?
So that is exactly what happened to us.
That is not what happened to you.
Exactly what happened to us.
Listen to the point very well. Listen to it. I said, from the beginning, are you listening? From the beginning, in Ezekiel 18, verse 20, I said, the soul who sins is the one who will die. The child will not share in the guilt of the father, neither will the father share in the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be accredited to them, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be charged against them. If you are accused for something that you've not done, will you bear the consequence?
That is, I understand you. But what I'm trying to let you understand is that Africans, they came to capture us, okay? And we went there to work. We worked very hard to make sure that they are developed. And they never paid us. They never paid us. That is not fair.
Who said they didn't pay us?
They never did.
They did.
If they did.
Did you remember that our forefathers, the chiefs, were paid? They enriched their pockets and also made their kingdoms powerful at the expense of the lives of the millions of people.
I think
their own
that
blood. Do you remember
that?
that?
They never paid us. They never paid us.
If that is not compensation, then I don't know your meaning of compensation.
They never paid us.
They did.
They never did.
They did. Check your
What is
books
your
very well. Check your books very well.
Thank you, Sewa.
Three minutes more.
Honorable judges, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Honorable judges, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask Miss Ekua that what shows that our African rulers were sold?
Mrs. Sewa. Miss Sewa, yes.
Yes. So,
there was a system known as pioneering, if you haven't heard about it. It is a system, ladies and gentlemen, where our African leaders themselves captured the able-bodied youth and sold them into slavery just because they owe them. My lady, I think you should be reading. If you read, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sure the rebuttals are done. Let's hear a big round of applause for our ladies. We'll defer now to the judges to hear their comments. We'll start off with Judge Linda Ampa, and she will pass a comment on Aisha.
All right. Hello, Aisha.
Hi, Auntie Linda.
I think you look very beautiful tonight.
Thank you.
Now, let's go to the debate. I think you started off well, and then you veered to the left, then to the right, then you lost me, so I couldn't follow you again. You were not firm. I didn't see any originality in the position that you took, so you were not clear. For Enam, I think you gave an outstanding debate. Your presentation was on point. It was clear. You went straight to the point. I found it original. Your expression was good. You did not deviate. Well done.
Let's hear from Sayofi.
Hello.
Sewa, please.
Good evening to all of you beautiful ladies. I think so far, so good. Sewa, you started off very well. I think you had a very good grounding from the very beginning. Except that you were too fast in your debate. And secondly, you lost me for a second in your delivery. Again, on your rebuttal, the question that you asked wasn't too clear for me. So I didn't follow it properly. But all in all, I think you did quite well. And then to Ekua, you were not very consistent. You started very well. You were speaking against the motion, all right. But then somewhere in the middle, you were a bit inconsistent because you were like speaking for instead of against the motion. So I think you should check your debate the next time that you mount the podium.
All right.
On your answer for the rebuttal, I think your counter question, which was a very strong one, and I think your 4 people could not come back with any solid points. All in all, you did well, but be consistent when it comes to debating and then stand firm with your point. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Uncle Yofi. And that leaves Sir to the mercy of Auntie Samantha.
Hello.
Hello.
Where are your supporters? Where are SAR's supporters? I heard them at the back. Okay, I want to start by saying you look really good. That's one of my favorite colors, by the way. I'll be honest with you, when I was listening to you, I also got a bit lost in terms of whether you were for or against. When you're trying to present an argument, it's good to come with the facts and figures. I'm not sure I heard it well. However, I liked your confidence. if I was to give you one chance, just give me one sentence to summarize your position, what would you say?
I would say that Africans should not be compensated because, first of all, our forefathers engaged in it. They worked hand in hand with the whites to take our brothers and sisters away. And also, with the year of return, our brothers and sisters from the diaspora has come to invest in our country. And this alone is an advantage for us. Thank you.
So you think that's compensation enough?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say that was a good submission at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And if you want to keep the ladies in the contest, you know what to do. Star 713, star 2 hash. Make sure it's counting there. Pick up your phone right now and vote. Don't say Minimiyanka. And wait and start asking questions after the queen has been crowned.